Hello, it is I, Alex, aka Reznov Rules, and I'm back and doing a different sort of YouTube video. If you're familiar with Breadtube, that's basically the style of video that I'm doing here. However, if you're not familiar, this video is definitely still worth the watch. What I'm going to talk about is basically about dating preferences and what constitutes preferences versus prejudice. It'll be sort of a look on what people look for and why. So, has a friend ever called you shallow? Or accused you of being racist, fatphobic, transphobic, tobaccophobic, whatever phobic, for not dating someone that they have recommended? Me neither. I don't have any friends to recommend dates to me. Now, whether you're like me or you have an actual social life, that's what this video will be about. Before we talk about what constitutes preference versus prejudice, let's travel back in time about 3 years in 2016. Feminist YouTuber Riley Dennis made this video called "Your Dating Preferences Are Discriminatory." You may also remember this, and it was not well received. So, go ahead and watch it if you want to. The video is linked in the description. If not, here's a quick summary. She starts off with, would you date or would you not date someone who is trans, black, fat, or disabled? She first emphasizes interracial dating, as that's the most common sort of thing talked about on this subject. And people generally tell it off like, well, preferences are just preferences. She then pivots to trans people, and goes on to say that your preferences are generally discriminatory if you say no to any of the above. Now back to trans people. She goes on to say that there are many conventionally attractive trans people, and maybe it's the genitals that people find off-putting, but if you date solely based on genitals, you're just reducing people to their genitals, so yeah. She also notes that gay men and lesbians also have those same sort of expectations regarding genitals a lot of the times. Riley, however, does mention that what we want in a partner is innate to an extent, and cites the failures of anti-gay conversion therapy as an example. She, however, pivots to argue that not dating trans, black, fat, or disabled people is based upon prejudice, and not what you would innately desire. She goes on to explain that these prejudices are not a consequence of your personal failings or of your character, but of what society implicitly tells you to be attracted to. She concludes that her point isn't to shame you or to tell you that you need to be attracted to a specific person. It is more to tell you that it will do you good and others good for you to make a conscious effort to unlearn your implicit biases. And that way, the world will be a happier and more loving place. As I said, this video was not received well. Several ranters, or as they'd be known today, skeptics, made videos criticizing her. Here's a few examples of people who made responses to her. Bearing, Mr. Repsion, Blair White, Jacqueline Glenn, and The Amazing Atheist. Of these responses, the most level-headed was probably from The Amazing Atheist. The worst were from people like Bearing. Bearing even has a video where he compiled a bunch of other people's, well, impolite takes on that video. Now, let's see how Riley's video is doing now in early 2020. Ooh. As you can see, it was not received well at all. Why not go over some hate comments? By the way, these comments are in sequential order as they appeared in the video. This person has an IQ of a toilet paper roll! Wow. Just wow. You are the reason your community has such a hard time being accepted. It won't be long before someone says that being straight is homophobic. Also, while searching for pictures of Riley to use for the thumbnail of this video, I found this fucking article. Tranny feminist declares you are discriminatory not to date him. Now, I'll first go and say that I think Riley made too broad generalizations, and I think it's incorrect to say that all those dating preferences are discriminatory in and of themselves. That was her title, too. And I don't think she did a very good job arguing how dating preferences can be based upon prejudice. Also, her title does come off rather accusatory. Her heart was absolutely in the right place, though. In the Amazing Atheist video I mentioned earlier, TJ, who is known as the Amazing Atheist, also says that her heart is in the right place while still giving her strong criticisms. Like many others, he also makes very broad generalizations and says that preferences are always valid and never based upon prejudice. The oppositional and reactive sentiment popped up a lot, and the level of hatred, vitriol, and let's be honest, bullying she received was honestly kind of sad. Although she isn't a content creator that I would likely subscribe to, I decided to watch a few other videos of hers, including recent videos. She comes off as a very kind and genuine person with not a mean bone in her body. The fact that people thought she was just maliciously telling people, "Sleep with me or you're a bigot," is somewhat upsetting. With all that out of the way, let's talk objectively about the topic of preference versus prejudice. So in general, I'd say a lot of people have personal characteristics or attitudes that are socially influenced, but if asked, they would say, "Oh, well, that's just how I am." Of course, part of who you are would be the same in a vacuum, but it's difficult to determine in many cases what is and isn't socially determined. We are shaped so much by our environment and our surroundings. Let's give an example of what is generally considered attractive. If you're someone who's attracted to women, do you prefer long hair or short hair? Most cis-het men would say long hair, noting that it's more feminine. However, men's hair and women's hair grow at the same rate. If you've ever seen a Cowboys and Indians movie, usually the Indian men and women have their hair about the same length. After a quick read on Wikipedia, my findings are that that was in fact the case with Native Americans. It's simply in our society and many others where men tend to get their hair cut shorter than women, so we have that association of masculine versus feminine. Another good example would be how women and even goddesses in the Renaissance paintings were drawn fat and with small titties. While what you prefer may deviate from what's fashionable, what's considered fashionable today are women who are skinny and have big titties. The point being that what you like or you don't like, or what you find attractive or not attractive, is shaped greatly by social influence and pressures. The one point of disagreement I have with Riley's video is that she seemed to be indicating that our preferences are 100% socially influenced, with the exception as to whether you're straight, gay, bi, pan, or ace. I would hazard a guess that even if we were to completely abolish fashion and social pressures, you'd still have your own unique preferences and such. I, of course, can't prove that, and that would require an impossible experiment. So we've briefly touched on how fashion and society influence what we look for in a person. Now let's go on a bit of a tangent. This comes back to the larger point, I promise. Are traps gay? ContraPoints has a really long but pretty good video on this topic. You probably don't want to watch such a long video right now. I'd recommend this one by Beau of the Fifth Column, where he answers that question very quickly in under 5 minutes. Now the term trap generally refers to a feminine presenting dude. And the meme basically is asking, are you gay if you mistake a feminine presenting dude as a woman and find that hot? I still haven't answered the question though. Are traps gay? One point that Beau makes in his video is about lamps. If you're a straight guy or a lesbian, have you ever seen one of those pictures of a lamp that looks like a woman's legs, some sort of optical illusion, and think to yourself, those are some sexy legs, but then you realize, oh, that's just a lamp. If so, did that make you insecure about your sexuality and make you ask yourself, oh god, am I attracted to lamps? I would guess not. Perhaps your working definition of a woman is someone with double X chromosomes, but that lamp doesn't have any chromosomes at all. However, sometimes people aren't just referring to femboys as traps. Sometimes they're referring to male-to-female trans women. It's not an uncommon story where a straight guy meets a trans woman in a bar or something, has a hoss for her, but upon realizing that she's trans, he beats her. Sometimes trans women are even killed for quote-unquote trapping men. These men do this to prove to themselves or to their peers that they aren't gay. So if you consider it trapping men, for a trans woman to present how she feels as her authentic self, you may be contributing to an attitude and belief that motivates real-world violence towards trans women. This is a point that both Bo and ContraPoints make. I would also like to mention that according to the American Bar Association, the trans panic defense is a real defense you can use if you end up in court for victimizing someone who is trans. Now, people have hooked up long before people even knew chromosomes were a thing. If you're attracted to women, you're not looking for chromosomes, are you? You're looking for what the caveman part of your brain identifies as female and sexy. So if you're a straight guy and you find a femboy or a trans woman attractive, that doesn't make you gay. You're simply attracted to what registers in your head at some level as female and sexy, even if you don't necessarily have a belief that MTF trans women are actually women. The same logic applies with FTM trans men and butch-presenting women. In fact, here's a comment from Bo's video that illustrates this point. I'm gay, was at a bar and asked a guy to dance. When we went to get a drink, my dance partner said, "You think I'm a guy, don't you?" I confessed I did, and we had a laugh. Dancing with a lesbian didn't make me straight. But let's go back to straight men and lesbian women dating trans women. In the case of men, perhaps you only want to hook up with someone who has a vagina, so you can fuck them in their vagina. I personally don't feel that that has to be necessarily transphobic. Sometimes preference is just preference. However, if you're someone who wishes to exclude trans people from your dating and sex life, perhaps it would be a good idea to be introspective as to why. I would be willing to bet in most cases the answer is either they have the wrong genitals or, well, they aren't a real woman/man. Like it or not, if you answer with a second one or try to dance around that answer, that does indicate some amount of prejudice. As for the first one, there could be two reasons for that. Either the caveman part of your brain doesn't really register attraction when presented with the quote-unquote wrong genitals, or your belief is that the genitals are wrong. First one can't necessarily be helped. However, if you only think that they're wrong just because that's your belief system and what you've been told to believe, much like what Riley said, the goal is not to shame you if your preferences are in fact based on prejudice. You simply should be aware of and more introspective about it. Last point is on interracial dating. Would you date or hook up with someone of a different race than yours? Maybe your caveman brain only registers certain skin tones or facial features as sexy. That sort of thing can't really be helped. However, what if your dating preferences are based on stereotypes or prescriptive ideas of what is normal? I mean, there are black people who say they won't date black people because of what they associate with blackness. I myself have no issue with interracial dating, but if you're hesitant about it or outright opposed to it, I'd again encourage you to be introspective about why that is. That about wraps up all I have to say on this matter. If I didn't outright persuade you to think differently, perhaps I've at least planted a few seeds as to maybe this sort of thing isn't so black and white. That's all for now. Expect more Breadtube style videos like this.